Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, Reincarnation, It's Not What You Were Told, with Dr. R. Craig Hogan. We'll be getting into theories about parallel realities and universes, as well as are we forced to be born over and over into the earth plane? You're going to want to hear what Craig Hogan has to say. He is a renowned expert on the life after this life and an author of 8 books about the afterlife and afterlife communication. He's in demand at international conferences, and I've known him for about a dozen years, having served on his board of directors for the Afterlife Research and Education Institute that he founded. You're going to want to hear this. It's controversial, but it's also uplifting. And now, Carefree and Conscious, Reincarnation, It's Not What You Were Told. Craig Hogan, welcome back to Carefree and Conscious.
Yeah, it's a delight to be here. I just love speaking with you, Susanne. So looking forward to today. Let's delve into it.
Well, we've known each other a lot of years, and you've been very generous with your time with me and my students. And a couple months ago, I wrote you with a question that the students, we call it ESP, but it's Extra Sensory People course. They had a question about timelines. How does all this work out with past lives? What is space-time? And you and I are going back and forth on the email. And I realized there is a dearth of information about this, all located, centralized in one place. And of all the people I know and know of even, you're the person that I want to address this with me. So thanks for coming back. Timelines. Can we really jump timelines? Is that a metaphor? Is that real? Where would you like to start with this whole discussion? You know exactly what I'm trying to explain here.
Sure.
You've sent me emails before, and I wish I could just get everyone's attention and focus and get into this subject, because frankly, for me, when people ask me questions about this, it gives me a headache. So where would you like to start?
We can start. We can start with Einstein. Einstein said that time is a persistent illusion. And the reason that he said that is because in physics, in quantum mechanics, there is no such thing as time. Time can be reversed. In other words, then it's called time symmetry, meaning that time in the past and time in the future, they're not really meaningful. So what I'm going to do is explain what we know, though, from a practical perspective. We know the fact that we have a memory of past experiences. So the memories stay with us. They're in the greater reality. We access them just by having our free will, decide to access them. So we can access a memory and we say, well, that must have been in the past. I experienced that before, and so then now I can say there is a past because I've got all those memories behind me. And then as a result of that, we've had learning. We understand what happened as a result of what happened to us in the past. So we say, well, that will happen in the future. And so now we've got the future. And we can only say we have the future if we had the past, because that's what tells us there is a future, that we can have a future. Now, if we didn't have the past and the future, we'd only have the now. And the now is not really a sliver. It isn't a dimension. There is no dimension to it. There is no past or present in the future, in the now. And as a result of that, then we experience things in the now, but there's no dimension to it. So what that leaves us with is we have the past, which is our memories, things we've experienced, and our future, things that we believe that we might experience based on the past. That's all we've got. As far as whether there is a time in the way that Newton saw it, the way that Newton saw it was that there's an arrow of time. It's a past, present, and future. And they all three exist. They have their own immediate existences. But that's not what we're finding out in today's realm, especially when we explore the afterlife and what the messages are that we're getting from the afterlife. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give to you what the messages are about time, about what we understand about time from our communications with people in the afterlife. Everything I say has sources in the afterlife. There's no guru or religion or other source for what I say. So I can go back to it and say, well, people in the afterlife have said this, and then it's corroborated by people in the afterlife. So what they tell us from the life after this life is that there is what they call a time of sorts. In other words, then they are continuing to grow. They can say they have a past. They have their memories from Earth. They have things happen to them, and then they remember them as new memories. They look forward to the future because they know based on the past that there will be things that will happen in the future. So there is a time of sorts, but there is no sun, no moon, no stars, no years, no months, no days in the life after this life. It is a continuum. So they continue to have their lives there. Now, we are carrying that time into the next life, which some call, the Theosophists call Summerland. We carry that into the next life because of the fact that we've had it on Earth. Earth uses time. Time is important here because we need to have that sense of a past, present, and future. And so then we carry that into the next life, into Summerland. Eventually, though, we drop that, and there's no need to have it. We understand from the higher celestial realms that there is no sense of time. There, everything is there all at once. It's possible to experience anything all at once, and so then there is not such a sense of time as past, present, and future. Although there is knowledge about things that happen and knowledge about what could happen, but it isn't the same way. So what we're told is that this is true and based upon what the communications are coming from the life after this life. But that squares with what we're hearing from the scientists, the quantum physicists on this side of life. And they say to us that the the person who was Einstein's professor, who's Hermann Minkowski, when he read Einstein's work, he said, you know what you're talking about? You're talking about another dimension, a new way to look at the dimensions. There is, instead of having time and then there's space, it's two different dimensions, then he said, it's all space-time. In other words, then space and time are on axes, and we can spot ourselves somewhere on those axes. And he described it as being like a big loaf. So you have a big loaf, and everything that ever was, ever will be, and everything that ever will be is in that loaf. And you can slice that loaf anyway. So you can slice it so that your now is a different now for someone else in the universe. And so then the reason that we know that it can be different is because time changes depending upon our proximity to a massive object, a physical object, and our speed. So if we're traveling very fast and if we're very near a massive object, then our time is going to be different from someone who's close to a slower object and a less massive object and a slower speed. And as a result of that, then we know that time is not fixed. Time is something which depends upon us. And so what it comes down to in both our memories and about the past, the present, the future, and about that big loaf of space-time is that time is personal. So we're each having a separate sense of time. Einstein said if you spend a minute on a hot stove, it goes very slowly. If you're with a pretty girl for an hour, then that goes very fast. And what he was saying was that time is very personal. Each one of us has a sense of time. So the important thing about that is that our time then can be changed. We can change our time personally so that we can have lives that are filled with love, peace, and joy. We can have lives that are, we have good experiences from the past. We look forward to the future. And so we can change the past, present, and the future based upon our personal experiences and who we are. And that's the important thing about time. Time later on, when we go into the next life, will change. We will have less of a sense of time. And eventually we'll have no time at all because everything will be simply available, simply there. But for now, our past, present, and future are dependent upon our personal feelings about what's happening. And we can change that. We can change our feelings about the past, present, and the future. And that's the important message about time.
Is changing our perception akin to changing timelines?
Yes. So we can change the perception. Our timeline then in our life can be changed so that we experience more of the time that we have in pleasurable experiences, in things that we want to experience. And then we can also then we can worry ourselves through life, and we can have these negative feelings, and we're always up in arms about something, and those then will change our sense of time because they will slow time down. So they're very personal, and we change those by the sense of who we are and what we're feeling and what we're doing. And so we can have a different sense of time. Now, as far as time travel is concerned, we would not be able to travel in time to our past as it is as a past because of the fact that that is simply a memory now. That's all we've got is the memory. And we can't go back into that memory. But what we can do is we can experience events that happened in the past when we go into the life after this life. So we can decide that we would like to go back to Queen Elizabeth's court, and we'd like to see what it was like to live with Elizabeth I and see what her court was like. And so we can go into those scenes and we can experience them and we can enjoy them, and we can't participate, but we have them exactly as they happen in real time, and we can experience them. This is what they tell us from the other side. So we can then go into various places in time and experience them as now events just by intending to go there. But we will have a sense of memory. We'll have the individuals that we are. Our loved ones are there with their memories. They remember all the wonderful times we had together. They remember the unfortunate times that we had together, and they're growing through those. But our sense of time then will change when we go into the life after this life, but we still will have this sense of a past, a present, and a future in some way.
If we can access histories, we can access emotions, moods, feelings, wisdom from what we consider to be the past. And on earth, it is the past, it is what it is to us. Does that mean in a past life regression, we didn't necessarily have to be that person to access that wisdom? How does that work?
Well, what we're hearing from them is, and this is coming through a number of sources. Mike Tim, for instance, has also recorded this from the messages from the past and or from the other side, and we're getting them in other messages. The idea of reincarnation is misunderstood. So what they're telling us is that we as individuals stay individuals throughout eternity, but then there will be other individuals from our higher self who incarnate, and they then can have a framework from our lives, and they can take a portion of our lives, and they want to learn lessons that we didn't learn. And so they will come into life, and then they will then have the experiences, and we could have a past life regression that was from a framework of another person's life on whose our life was determined. And so we do not change into another person from what they say. Instead, what happens is another person in the higher self will come into being. And so then these memories that we have when people go into a past life regression is a memory of another life, but that doesn't mean that we then, as an individual, were experiencing that life. It is that other person on whose framework our life was taken. And so that's what they tell us about reincarnation and about past lives.
What do you mean by it was that other person's life that became the framework for our life? Who is orchestrating that?
So that's the planning group. So when our souls are planning, this is coming from Rod Schwartz's book, his books, several books. And what Rob Schwartz has discovered through his mediums when he was working with them is that our lives are planned. Entities and people, our guides, and our soul We'll sit around working to decide what it is that's going to happen in our lives, the families that we have, the events, the general framework of our lives. We still have free will, so we can change things. We don't have to do whatever they plan. But that basic planning is coming from that planning group. And so then that planning group is going to be planning that there will be things that will be happening, and we can change that if we want to, but we will follow that plan that they have. And what that means is that they will then, as they're planning, take frameworks or pieces from another person's life who has already gone onto the earth plane and has gone through their life and has had the experiences, and that now they are in the life after this life, and we are following them. We are going into Earth School, and when we go into Earth School, we may have a fragment of their life or a whole framework from their life. And what they say is that we then are remembering in a past life regression, we are remembering their life. The terminology already sets us up for belief that it is our life. It was past life regression, when it really is another life regression. An intertwined life regression. And so that's what they're telling us from the other side. There's a lot of controversy about this. I mean, I hear people insist that there is a reincarnation, that we become some other person, and they say we've had thousands of these reincarnations, but it's difficult to make that happen when we're still the individual, and people are individuals and stay individuals in the next life. We've had reports. There's one in a book called "Life in the World Unseen" by Anthony Borgia, and he describes a man who's been in Summerland for 1,000 years. And we know people from the Roman Empire come through, and we know that our loved ones are always available. They don't say, nobody says, "Oh, they're out. They've reincarnated. They're not available to communicate with you." So we know the fact that they're available. They're still there. They are individuals, and these individuals then will continue with their life. Although there are other people who are also coming along, and they had a framework that was based on our life. And then we will meet them once we've gone on to the life after this life and everybody is there. But the idea that somehow I'm going to become an Eskimo woman with 14 children in the next life, it wouldn't be me. That wouldn't be Craig doing that. This is an entirely different person. So it isn't really us, but we do have access to that. And that's what the past life regression is. And that's why the notion of past lives comes in. We do have access to that other person, just as we have access to anybody in the world. The reason that we can't access everybody's memories and understand everybody's life from what they were in the past is that we have to have the cues. In other words, we have to be able to bring up that memory out of the greater reality, some would call the Akashic record. And so then we will bring up those memories from that greater reality of this other person. And that's where the past life regression comes from. We're getting their memories, we're getting their lives because they're intertwined with us.
You mentioned Rob Schwartz, and I just had him here on Carefree and Conscious.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I found very comforting that he said was, whatever you feel you've learned from a regression, use that as wisdom and always think, what would love with the capital L do in any given situation? So you're both talking about taking the wisdom of
Mhm.
anything that you've learned from past life regression, but
Mhm.
also take comfort in knowing that you're not going to be forced to reincarnate. I mean, that's actually been upsetting to me over the years, that we
Mhm.
think that there is a source that is so mean that they would force us to come back and have
Mhm.
bad experiences to learn something.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Yeah, yeah, and of course we know that the divine, our universal intelligence, the basis of all being, is entirely loving. There is nothing other than love, and that's why when people have near-death experiences and they encounter this being, they feel a sense of love that they've never felt in their lives. They come back and they're in tears every time they think about it. You can see their change in their demeanor when they just think about that experience because our universal intelligence is nothing but love. There's nothing but love there. There's no judgment. There's no condemnation. There's no punishment. There's no hell, certainly. And so then our universal intelligence is going to be helping us to understand what it is that's gone on in our lives. And when we encounter that, then we feel that unconditional love, that love from that being that is with us. And so then we then will come into that presence. And then when we're in that presence, then we are learning how to love. And that's the goal. So our goal is to grow in love and compassion, to become all that we can become in our relationships with other people. And that the source then, our universal intelligence that is at the basis of everything, is entirely love. And that's the love that we then are part of, because we're a segment of, we're one of the aspects of our universal intelligence. We just have to let that love shine through, let that love come out that's being hidden by what we've learned from the world. And when we grow into that, then we become all loving. We become loving people. But all we have to do is allow that to come through. It's already there. It's just that the world then covers it up with concerns and with our desires and with our expectations and all of the things, the baggage that we've carried from our childhood. And so we grow through our lives to give up on the baggage, to turn our backs on it, thus spake Zarathustra. Nietzsche said, "We are like." When we begin, we are like camels. We bear burdens in our lives as children, and then we carry those into our adult life. And in our adult life, then we become lions. And as lions, then we have to slay the dragon of the past. The dragon of the past has scales. On each scale is the words "thou shalt," and then something follows. And he says we have to destroy that dragon. And when we destroy the dragon, then we change from the lion into a small child, because we become naive and understanding and accepting, and the way that a small child is. And so that's what we do in our lives. We get rid of the baggage of our childhood, and we begin to become loving, accepting people who really are on a different level of existence, because we love unconditionally. That's our goal. That's what we're moving towards. And that is our birthright. And that comes from the natural part of who we are at our basis in our universal intelligence.
Well, let's address some of the folks that are going to feel maybe disappointed to hear that, oh, I don't really reincarnate. I've invested all this time and money into past life regressions, or I teach it, or I'm a hypnotherapist. Did I waste my time? Am I delusional? What do you say to those folks?
Well, it's a matter of perspective. What we don't understand is the fact that our lives are planned, and we are here to learn lessons, grow in love and compassion, and enjoy life. And then when we realize that, then we realize that we were given that past life regression to help us to learn something that we need for this life. It's a gift. And in fact, that's what Rob Schwartz's book's subtitle is, that it's a gift. And we are given this gift of understanding, of realizing what our past lives were like, which is really someone else's life. And when we review that person who is intertwined with us, then we can learn things that will be beneficial to us in this life. It's part of our growth. It's part of us becoming who we are. So that was planned. That past life regression, which is really another life regression, is planned for us so that we can grow and become all we can become in this life. And it will help us with the trials and the problems we have. And those trials and problems could be because of our framework that we got from this other person. So if my framework has come from somebody who had a tendency to set fires, they were a pyromaniac, then I may have that. That may be part of the fragment that I've got in my life, so that I can learn not to do that, or I can learn to overcome that difficulty. And so when I go into a past life regression, which is an other life regression, I may find out that about what that person did. And that may give me a perspective on my life. That, no, I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be setting fires the way I'm inclined to do. And now I understand that better because I know that someone else has gone through that and they've come out the other end, and they are saying that you can be a different person. So the past life regression, which is an other life regression, is to intended, it's designed, it's part of our path in life to help us to grow to our next level, to our next dimension. The same with near-death experiences. The near-death experiences are intended to help us to grow through the rest of our lives. And so they're different from the final, when we actually make the transition into the next life. But they're giving us very deep insights. And these are emotional, these are sensitive insights that we're receiving that are really life-changing. And then we're going to live the rest of our lives differently. We're going to become a new person. It's like part of the training. So we're in Earth School, and that is part of what helps us to grow. So the past life regressions and the near-death experiences are all intended to help us in the rest of our lives as we live with people and grow in our ability to have love and compassion for all people.
Well, I remember when I was becoming a hypnotherapist, and I did it what I consider to be the right way. Go to school, go to an accredited institution that's teaching it. They have you audio record some of your sessions. And I remember asking my teachers, my test subjects are asking me questions. I'm not sure I know how I'm supposed to answer them. I knew how I wanted to answer them. And one is, why am I accessing, or can I access lives that seem to overlap? Shouldn't I have died here? And then I couldn't have been born, 50 years before that if I was still living over here. But they're like, overlapping time frames don't make sense. And then also, why is it that if I get a reading, the person is available? And also, I'm scared. What if my husband or my child reincarnates before I get there? And I have all these questions, and I'm like, wait a minute, Susanne, you know that as long as the information is helpful, hopeful, and healing, to quote something Edgar Casey said, which is how I try to live my life by, and my students get tired of hearing, is it 3H, helpful, hopeful, and healing. But it doesn't matter if it's confabulation, it doesn't matter what they're accessing, as long as it's helpful. And then also, in all of my life, I've never had a guide come in and say, oh, so and so can't connect right now, he's reincarnated. It just never, ever happens. So I saw the benefit and I saw the utility to this, but I know that there are going to be people really disappointed thinking that, oh my God, it wasn't real. It's as real as you want it to be. It's as real as the wisdom that you take with you. So thank you for that. That is very, very clear how you explained it. I want to shift gears now, though, and I want to talk about the parallel universe discussion that goes on. It dies down for a while, then it comes back again, and I think it's going on really strong right now. And I'll give you an example. I had a student say she was in a really bad vehicle accident and she walked away without any problems. And she said, but she was concerned that in a parallel universe or parallel reality, maybe she died and her family's suffering. My first thought is, why would you like poke that bear? Or why would you even want to worry about that? You're here and you're now and you're okay. But then I thought, but it's sort of an existential question. How would you address a question like that?
Yeah, yeah, and that's Everett's many worlds interpretation, and the idea of parallel universes, and it really came out of when we learned that our observation of life collapses what's called a superposition. It means that all of the possibilities, but our experience in life then collapses all of the possibilities into one, and then we have our present moment. And so then out of that then came a problem for the scientists who were thinking about that, and they were saying, well, no, they don't want to believe that because they're materialists, that somehow our consciousness can affect reality, that we can collapse reality into one thing. And so then they discovered that there was a real problem with called the double slit experiment, when you would send light through two slits, and it would go on the back wall, and it would show an interference pattern, in other words, like waves that were interfering with each other on the back wall. But if you observed it, then all of a sudden the waves stopped, and there was just a line on the back wall. And every time you looked away, then it came back to the waves. And then if you looked at it, it went back to lines. And so then there was a great difficulty for the materialist scientists to say, how could our consciousness change reality? How can it make that become lines instead of being interference patterns, instead of being waves? And so then they said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. What we'll do is we'll create it so that both things could happen. That it could be lines, it could be waves, and in different realities. And every time we look, then we create a new reality. And so then they tried to get around that difficulty by making up these parallel universes, these alternate realities. And there's no evidence of them. There's no empirical evidence. To be able to put forth a theory, you have to be able to falsify it. So you have to be able to say, well, based upon this evidence, based upon this study that we're doing, we can say that's false, or we can say that that's true. And you can't do that with parallel universes. It's still a theory, and that's the reason that people who are questioning it and saying, oh, no, there's no such thing, it's because of the fact that there's no evidence for it. So we can expect that everything that we're doing in this life is only in this life. And I think that at the very least that's true. And that we don't need to worry about whether we're going to be doing something else in some parallel universe. Our universal intelligence doesn't make life like that. Everything in our lives is a result of a very personal, loving, concerning effort by our universal intelligence to make of this life everything it can be for us as an individual. This is a personal universe that we're living in. And so we wouldn't have to worry about something happening that was against our control in some other universe someplace. And it is only this universe, only this time, only these memories that are happening for us. And that's the way our universal intelligence, or God, whatever you want to call it, that's the way it's constructed for us. So we don't have to worry about those parallel universes. As far as we know, they don't exist.
Wow, so that's going to blow a lot of minds. Is Earth a closed system or an open system? And what does that mean?
Yeah, it is a closed system in the sense that the things that happen to us, and that, let's say that it's in our lives, because Earth is just part of a whole universe, and this whole universe, everything that's in this universe is for us individually, and it's closed. So what that means when we say it's closed, it means we can have experiences. The moon is still going to be there tomorrow when we look at it. You know, the microwave background radiation, which seems to show that there was a big bang, that's going to be there tomorrow when we look for it. All these things in the universe are there because of the fact that we need that stability. We need that to be able to grow and learn lessons in this life. So it is a closed system. And the next system that we go to in Summerland isn't like it's in a different location. It's just another system. And we simply are, by changing our focus from this life into Summerland, into the next life, when we change our focus, then it's simply there. It's like we were standing looking at a waterfall, and we turn around and we look at the forest, and we see that there are not two realities, there are two focuses. And so then we are focused on the waterfall, then we're focused on the forest, but that's all it is. So we change focus when we go from this life to the next life. We still have access to this life, but we do it through our focus. We can decide that we want to come back into Earth to visit our loved ones, to spend time with them, to stay with them when they're grieving. And we make that choice to come back because of the fact that we just change our focus. And the way they describe it is in the Leslie Flint sessions, which are wonderful sessions. And we actually have a man who was wondering about his loved ones when he crossed into the next life. And so then his guide, the person who was with him, said, "Well, you want to visit your loved ones and see what they're doing?" And he said, "Yes, I sure would." And he just like snapped his fingers. It was just there he was. He was in his kitchen with his wife, and she's peeling potatoes, and he says, I'd like to communicate to her. How can I do that?" The guide said, "Well, focus on her and think the thoughts that you would think to her." And so he does it, he says her name, and she drops the knife that she's holding, and she runs off into the other room crying because she got his message. But all he's doing then is he changed focus to go back to the earth plane. And then he focused on her, and he had an effect on the earth plane. And then he went back after that to the life after this life. And so what we're really doing is we're changing focus when we do that from one place to another. So that shows that our lives then are very personal. We are the ones who make them things happen. We can have a parallel reality in the sense that we can go back to our things that happened in the past in other people's lives. We can view what happened in the past. We can go into the future in the next life and see, at least in a limited extent. The people in the life after this life don't know everything about the future. They're not omniscient, but they do have the insights into the near future about what will happen in our lives. And that's simply by focusing on it. They just focus on that. So when we know that this change of focus, which is entirely mental, is the key to how we have experiences in this life and how we can have extra normal other experiences just by changing focus from one focus to another.
The change of focus, the accessing wisdom, regardless of whether it was your experience or it's in the collective consciousness, this is all a very gentle and loving way of looking at the world and our roles within it. Our world, though in three-dimensional Earth, is not gentle often. Is that by design?
Yes. So our lives, then we had to look at our lives individually instead of collectively. So we can't say what happens to humankind. All we can say is what happens to me or what happens to Joe or, to my loved one. So all of these things that happen to us are happening to us as individuals. Our lives were planned as individuals. And so then we do have, there are groups, soul groups, and they then will communicate with each other. Our souls who are in the soul group will communicate about the lessons that we're learning about what's happening in our lives, how things can be different. So then there is communication among the souls that were planning in our soul group. But everything that happens to us then is very personal. It's intended to help us to love and to learn and to grow. And so then we have to realize that when we talk about suffering and what humankind is suffering, and about the child who is suffering, is starving to death in some family that can't get food, and people say, well, how could someone do that to that child? How could a planning group have planned that life for that child? And we can't understand that. We can't question why it is that that's happened. But each one of us has that experience. We have experiences in our lives that are suffering, as well as experiences in our lives that are wonderful and uplifting. And we can choose to go into suffering experiences. There were during the episodes in Ireland when there were groups who were starving themselves to death in order to protest, and they made the choice to starve themselves. A child is starving. That's something that they didn't do to themselves, but it is part of life. It is part of the plan. It's part of what goes on here. And so each one of these that we look at when we say there's suffering in the world, we have to say, I suffer. That person in Ireland suffered, that child suffered. And we can only talk about it individually. And then we can say, what is it that might have been going on in their life that they're learning? Why are they experiencing this? So much of what happens in our lives are happening because of what other people do to us. So what people do to other people. We then have a responsibility to mature humankind so that people are not mean and cruel to other people. That's the largest part of what happens that we say is suffering. There's pain. We have pain, but pain is not the suffering that people talk about. They talk about what people do to other people. We change humankind by becoming more loving and compassionate. Every incident in which we love, we are adding to humankind's measure of the ability to love. And so we change in ourselves, in our own lives, in our own little circle, and then we are changing humankind as a result of that. But then we will make those changes. We will have those incidents. We will have suffering in our lives. Other people have suffering in their lives. We can't judge their suffering. We can't understand it. But we can realize that everything that we are doing is because we're learning something that's going to be valuable to us and to other people in our circle. And that's the important lesson.
And we can help right in place where we are. Sometimes the world's problems feel so big and insurmountable that we just want to tune out. But I really feel like we can help wherever we are. When people say, what can I do to make a difference? Work on yourself first. And then right where you are, look at your own community and what does it need? I've got one last question for you. But before I ask that question, how can people work with you and seek reality?
If they can get on seekreality.com, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give to people, the general public, everything that we're finding out about the life after this life and how to live this life. And so we're making it available on seekreality.com. And anybody can get a hold of me by emailing me at craig@seekreality.com. And I invite anybody to ask questions, and I will answer every one of them. So I invite you to do that.
My last question, what is free will and how is the best way for us to exercise it?
So free will is a topic that has been bounced around for millennia. Laplace, at the turn of the 20th century, 19th to the 20th century, said there is no free will. Everything that we do is determined. In other words, that we grew in our lives and we learned things that we didn't intend to learn, and as a result of that, we're doing things as like automatons, like robots, and of course Calvin had a belief in predestination, that we were predestined to do what we do, and so we know today that those are not true. Among those who are even materialists say that chaos theory, the fact that there are so many variables, so many things happening, we couldn't possibly have a predetermined life. The things that we do are not predetermined. But we know that in a larger sense because of what we know now about the life after this life and who we are in eternity. And we know that we have free will. We can change our lives. We can become whatever we want to become. We needn't focus upon all of the awful things that are happening in our life and saying, oh, that's this suffering and it's happening to me and I have no control over it. We do have control. We have free will. We can do whatever within our limited ability, within our limited circle. We can do what we need to do to have that peace of mind that we can have in spite of all circumstances. That is within our control. We have the free will to change our lives, to become all we can become. We are not predestined to suffer, and we don't have to be in a suffering situation. We can take ourselves out of that situation. That is using our free will.
As always, very generous with your time and your information. And I know that everything that you've said today can be cited and is backed up at seekreality.com. Dr. R. Craig Hogan, thank you.
Okay, it's been a delight.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media at Carefree Medium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.